Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our cybersecurity webinar part 2. This meeting is being recorded. We'll notify you when the video is available for on-demand viewing, and that will be on our website. I will put in the chat when I'm done reading through this. I'll put in the chat the link at which you will be able to find that, and it usually takes us 24 hours to get that up on our website. To reduce background noise, all participants have entered in listen-only mode. So if you have questions, we're going to ask that you use the chat panel, and Linda will monitor that, and we will ask your questions of the panelists. If you lose your Zoom connection this morning, close your Zoom and reconnect using the same meeting link, or if that doesn't work, you can reboot your computer and reconnect with the same meeting link. Linda Caprera with the Maine State Chamber is our host this morning. Linda, take it away.
Hello, everyone. My name is Linda Caprera, and I am the Senior Government Affairs Specialist for the Maine State Chamber of Commerce, and I will also be the moderator for today's webinar. I would like to welcome you and thank you for participating in part 2 of our cybersecurity webinar series. As you know, this issue of cybersecurity has taken front stage as businesses around the world see a growing number of threats to their data systems, personal information, and ability to operate, costing billions of dollars. This cybersecurity webinar series is our attempt to raise awareness and highlight the importance of the need for companies to protect their data, emphasize the need for preemptive action, and let them know what's going on in terms of on the horizon at the federal level. In our webinar 2 weeks ago, our speakers emphasized that cybersecurity protection starts with us individually, whether it be turning off our cell phones for a period of time or just turning them off when we're not using them. Awareness and education are key. Cyber attacks, as you know, are only becoming more and more sophisticated and have increased dramatically over the past several years. And unfortunately, this threat is going to continue. So what I want to do is I want to first thank our sponsors. We have a number of sponsors that have been very great to us in sponsoring both the webinar series. Our premier sponsors are Go, Give It, Get It and Thomas College. Our community sponsors are Cross Insurance, Markham, University of Maine, the University of Maine School of Law, and IEEE. And our supporting sponsors are Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Rudman and Winchell, MEMIC, AmeriHealth, Caritas, and Eaton Peabody. And I believe we have a video from Give It, Get It. Thank you, Angie.
What is Give IT, Get IT? Formerly PCs for Maine, Give IT, Get IT is the only nonprofit tech recycling and reuse organization in the entire Northeast. Thanks to 240 recycling clients like IDEX, Bangor Savings Bank, and Systems Engineering, we've connected over 16,000 Mainers with the computers, training, and support they need to achieve digital equity. At Give IT, Get IT, we believe digital inclusion is a four-legged stool. To be digitally literate, a person needs guidance to find the right computer and the resources to acquire it, internet access to train for skilled, well-paying jobs, and ongoing technical support. Here in Maine, 85,000 households don't have broadband internet access, and another 65,000 Maine households don't own a computer. For these unfortunate people, their digital inclusion stool is completely broken. The good news is the federal government has earmarked $250 million to increase broadband internet access here in Maine. This exciting influx of cash will give Mainers in need a huge leg up in their pursuit of digital equity. To stabilize the other three legs of the digital inclusion stool, we're seeking your support. Together, we can help people of limited means rise above their unique challenges, achieve digital equity, and fulfill their dreams. Whether that's finding a better job, staying connected to loved ones, going to school remotely, or accessing online services and support. Your business's outdated PCs and laptops could be the future tools of people in need. To learn how your company can sustainably recycle its old tech and be a force for digital inclusion, please connect with us today at giveitgetit.org.
Thank you, Angie. And what I'm going to do now is we have 3 experts in this field, and I'm going to introduce them individually, and then we will hear from them. Scott Valcour is an associate teaching professor at the Kahori College of Computer Sciences at the Rue Institute at Northeastern, a national research leader in cybersecurity infrastructure. Scott has been a part of the development of more than a dozen worldwide networking technologies, causing Network World Magazine in 2001 to name him one of the most powerful people in networking. He was the second director of the world-renowned University of New Hampshire's Interoperability Laboratory from 1993 to 2004, and has been the principal investigator of Network New Hampshire Now. Scott has developed and managed over $100 million in grant funds, focused on the creation of next generation infrastructure and applications utilizing broadband across the region. He has a BA in computer science with mathematics emphasis, cum laude from St. Anselm College in Manchester, New Hampshire, which by the way is my alma mater, and a Master of Science in Computer Science and PhD in Engineering, Systems Design with a cognate in college teaching from the University of New Hampshire. A native Mainer, he and his family live in an 1800 farmhouse in Gray. Welcome, Scott. John Perkins comes to Maine Technology Group with a very deep business development and operational background. Having graduated from University of Maine at Augusta with a bachelor's degree in public administration, he is currently scheduled to graduate with his MBA from Southern New Hampshire University in 2023. John brings over 22 years of diverse background in IT management and law enforcement. His experience includes complex project management, sales, business development, budgeting, marketing, and executive management. John joins MTG, having most recently worked for Fairpoint Communications. Having been born and raised in Maine on a dairy farm, John possesses a strong work ethic and a sincere desire to establish long-term relationships with the businesses that work hard to make Maine a great place to live and work. John has served his local community in many areas, including working in Belgrade on the Budget Committee, as well as serving on the United Way Board in Southern Kennebec Valley. John and his wife, Diane, and their two children live in Rome. Welcome, John. And finally, our final speaker is Matthew Eggers, Vice President for Cybersecurity Policy in the Cyber Intelligence and Supply Chain Security Division at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and leads the Chamber's Cybersecurity Working Group, which focuses on developing and advocating the organization's cyber policies before Congress, the administration, and the business community. He is the author of Internet Security Essentials for Business 2.0, a tool to help businesses use effective cyber risk management practices. He is a graduate of the executive leadership programs at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government and the Naval Postgraduate School, specializing in cybersecurity and homeland defense, respectively. He earned his MA in International Commerce and Public Policy from George Mason University and his BA in History and Political Science from Indiana University. He resides in Virginia with his wife and children. Welcome, Matthew. So our first speaker will be Scott. So Scott, take it away.
Super. Oops, there we go. Yeah, all right. Thank you very much, Linda. So, today's session all about cybersecurity. And when I was thinking about cybersecurity, I thought, well, how far back do I need to go to think about what is this cybersecurity concept? And I was teaching a course on information security. I think it was a special topics course back in 2004 in Manchester, New Hampshire. And it was a fall course. And the reason why I remember that is because there was this new thing that was being launched in October of 2004 called the Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It was October because you don't want to get spooked like in Halloween. So it was right around October period. And it was this notion to say to all of us across the country, in the Department of Homeland Security and the National Cybersecurity Alliance were the partners in launching this, what was and has now become the first of every single cybersecurity month that we do every October, to basically say to us, we should be aware, we should be paying attention to what does security mean in the cyber world in much the same way we pay attention to security in the physical world. We have locks on doors, we have security cameras, we have perimeter monitoring and all those sorts of physical security aspects. But we forgot, at least back in that time, and it continues to precipitate up to today, we've forgotten that there are other ways in. There are other connections that we have. And as we use and as we build out, as you saw in the video of our sponsor, Go Get IT, Give IT, the whole idea of connectedness is growing. And we're working to make sure that every single location in the entire country has a connection to the internet, which then means we're all on the same network, which means there are other ways into the house besides the front or the back door of the building. There's a network, there's a pathway in. And that's where being aware of cybersecurity comes into play, is we need to be diligent just as much as we might lock the door when we leave the house. We also need to make sure we lock the network and the network connection as we are doing what we're doing, such as we are today, from home, as well as in our businesses. You know, the whole notion of cybersecurity awareness was to have all of us in the initially in the business world, but ultimately now also at home, to be thinking about what do we need to do to be aware of the kinds of attacks that we might have on cybersecurity. It's not just all the interesting things we might hear about in the media every single day, but it's the everyday things that we deal with that come to get us. And so part of the cybersecurity awareness is to look at how do you sponsor workshops amongst your community, whether it be your maybe your community group or your church or synagogue or place of worship, or just gathering areas that you might have. Take a little bit of time and try to figure out what are the kinds of things that we need to do to make sure we protect ourselves in the cybersecurity space. Develop some sort of culture around making sure that when we do have equipment, that we're using it in a way that is going to be secure. We're keeping certain pieces of equipment up to date the way they should be. We're making sure that, as Linda said in her initial presentation this morning, just shutting off your phone for a period of time, turning off your computer for a period of time. But more importantly, we need to have a bit of a more skepticism attitude towards cybersecurity. Would the kind of thing that's being presented to us actually happen? Would you get an email out of the blue that says, hey, I've got free gifts for you. You should take them. Click here and I will send them to you. The reality is that's not a natural thing that occurs, but if we're skeptical about it, we realize that isn't something that's going to naturally happen to us. Or as you often hear in law enforcement, they'll never ask for you to, via a telephone call or an email, to provide some kind of credit card number or fund source for anything over the network. And so those are the kinds of activities that we refer to as phishing. Phishing is really easy for the bad actors out there in the world to perform, and it's very effective. And so some of the things that we need to think about are how do we come up with some good anti-phishing activities? And if you're involved in an organization, you run a business, whether it's small or large, some kind of cybersecurity awareness program that is not only effective but fun is the way to go. And in 2021, unlike 2004, when it first was launched as the Cybersecurity Awareness Month, there are some great tools and some great little videos that you could break out and use within your organization, within your company, and even as us as individuals at home, to be able to help us understand what are the kinds of things we should be on the lookout for. How do we become more skeptical about what's happening out there in the world? Just the whole notion of phishing, not the kind that we do out there in the waters, the great waters of the state of Maine, but the kind that is trying to find and get access to our data, to get access to our money, to get access to the things that belong to us as individuals. Those are the kinds of attacks that we need to somehow be diligent and aware that they could be coming, and to ask ourselves, is this real? Could this really happen? The second area, and in 2021, some of the great tools out there were focusing on phishing, two-factor authentication, which is another way of being able to get us access to the tools that we have and the things that we want to get and resource active. Two-factor authentication basically is to look at the 3 different factors that we could utilize when it comes to authentication. things we are, things we know, and things that we have. And so things that we are, our fingerprints, our eyes, the retina scans, our faces. I traveled prior to the pandemic overseas and in Europe. Facial recognition to board planes was the norm in the airlines that I was working with. And it's just now starting to roll out as possibilities here in the US. And that is a kind of thing that is who you are. There's just no way around who you are. You'll always have that with you. But the things that you know and the things that you have become the two factors that we tend to use. You know a password, or you know the answer to a security question or a security code that you've created or has been provided to you, or the things that you have, which might be like a mobile device that sends either a text message or some other message to you that says, if you're really trying to get into this login account, you will be able to take what we've given to you and through a different channel, verify through a second channel that you are who you are. And if you don't get that, or you get one and you didn't expect to be doing that, that's a good example that somebody is trying to be you when they shouldn't be. Things like job scans and just protecting your own personal info are all part of this cybersecurity awareness. How do you deal with that and focus on it? And social media, as wonderful as it is to keep up to date with our friends and family, it also becomes a great source for people to look and see, where did you go? What are you doing? What's happening right now? Those are public information that we share ourselves. And sometimes we need to really be considerate of what that might be. Finally, in the thoughts that I have for you as you're thinking about the future is you want to create in your organization cybersecurity leaders. They're the people who are going to set the example, people who are going to be able to say to others, hey, have you patched your operating system? There was a new patch that came out last night. And if you're in the Microsoft world, Patch Tuesday. Tuesday is the day that Microsoft typically puts out operating system patches. And generally, if it isn't Tuesday night, it's Wednesday morning, like this morning, when my machine goes through and does its updates, because I've said, hey, let's make sure my operating system is current, and any kind of potential area that could be a place where a bad actor could connect into my machine, I'm going to make sure that the updates are automatically going into place. So patching operating systems, just following good hygiene on your own computer is good. Making sure that you've got virus scanning, that the only software you're putting on your computer are the things that you know are software that you should have on there, that is well known and authoritative, that you're turning on the internal firewalls, as well as running a network both in your organization as well as at home that takes advantage of firewalling technology, blocking out the connections that you aren't normally going to use, to make sure that as we now live in a world where living at home and working at home are one and the same, and our business networks are now also into our home networks, we need to make sure that we are doing the kinds of good hygiene activity on those networks that protect ourselves as individuals, but also protect our organizations and our commercial interests as businesses. And finally, I can't stress enough, having good passwords is key. There are all kinds of great examples of considering not only coming up with strong passwords that have a mix of randomized letters, numbers, and strange characters that you might include in your password, but maybe considering a password that is something that follows some non-guessable pattern. I once was a science fair judge for a high school science fair, and the students, using 2 computers and a great set of software that they had written, were able to do what was called a dictionary attack on a set of passwords. And if I typed in a password that I thought was using a dictionary word that was secure into the program, within 20 seconds, they were able to crack the password, no matter what kind of funky characters I might have used in there. If it was a dictionary word, they had a way to be able to find it. And how many of us use dictionary words and as part of our pattern in our passwords? They become very easy to crack. And so part of that good hygiene, part of that good cybersecurity awareness is to make sure that the passwords are going to be good ones. But how do you teach that to people? How do you help them realize that the passwords they have might not be good? Well, every year, the Department of Homeland Security, NCSA, and other organizations put out some of the example bad passwords. Have fun with it. Do something fun in your organization. Work with your folks and say, who can come up with the worst password that's out there, and see where it falls in, say, the top 100 bad passwords that are known out there in the world. And of course, password 123, 123456, the number on our luggage, as you might have on a famous movie. All of those things are bad passwords, and how to help people follow some of those best practices and utilize them are going to help make cybersecurity be top of mind for your organization as well as for us as individuals. Because today, in the world of post-pandemic, and I think probably the world to stay with us, is cybersecurity begins at home and will permeate out into our businesses and throughout our community. And the more that we're aware that cybersecurity is part of our mission that we individually have to focus on and be aware of it, will also mean that it'll become harder and harder for the bad actors to do what they do to unsuspecting victims and prevent us from being on that list.
Thank you very much, Scott, for your remarks. Very insightful. Our next speaker is John Perkins from Maine Technology Group. John?
Good morning. Thank you to the Chamber for letting me come on and be part of their webinar. And thank you for putting the webinar on, because it's I think it's one of the ways that we help to attack this this front, as Scott was referring to, because it several of the things he said were kind of a great segue for where I'm coming from. So to put a little bit of light on that so that everyone has what I'm about to say in the right frame of mind. So Maine Technology Group is a managed service provider. So we get called to provide network support for actual businesses in the state of Maine. So our businesses are in many different verticals. So we do attorneys' offices, accounting, manufacturing, and a lot of healthcare as well. So when we get called to come in and help with networking, it's a full-time engagement. Usually it's a constant monitoring, and Scott referred to patching and updating. That's one of the very baselines of kind of security. And this stuff is all, I want everyone to know, first of all, do not be assuming that you're the only one behind the curve when it comes to security or cybersecurity. Everyone is behind the curve. That's actually the intent of the bad guy, is to be at the very cutting edge of the curve, and they're looking for those of us that are behind. So it's the whole self-judging thing when it comes to this stuff has no place, because everybody is constantly trying to figure out how to keep themselves safe and protected. So what I want to talk about in my little 15-minute jab here is that this stuff is very, very much whatever you can think of. Scott referred to the kind of the layers that we go through to protect our home. And I use that metaphor often when I'm talking to clients. We call it the castle mentality. So when it comes specifically to cyber and what's connected to our network, you have to do layers of protection. So you have the castle drawbridge, which I refer to that as the firewall. You have the moat, you have the archers on the wall, the oil is boiling. So all of these things are intentional so that you can keep your business safe, and then be prepared to pivot, because it's not if you get attacked, it's really when. And that's really changed over the last 4 or 5 years. The amount of increase, it almost doesn't even bear to give you statistics. In the COVID year of 2020, they increased 300% in the first 6 months of the year. You know, the bad guys saw an unbelievable opportunity with everybody going remote, and all of a sudden security was the last thing in our minds, but it was personal security and it was personal protection. So all of these other things suffer. So I'm going to try to give you some very basic things you can take from this webinar and put into action today. And here's the most important one. Nobody expects you to know all of this stuff or write it down. There's nothing we're going to give you that gives you all the answers. It really is about, if you're running a small business, or if you're involved in a small business as a trusted partner or somebody who's expected to provide resources, it's really about finding somebody or a company that can help you fill in this gap. Much like a small business person would never try to pass off as an accountant if they aren't one. I know I wouldn't. So you're going to go out and you're going to find an accountant. If you're buying or selling your business, you're going to find an attorney. So it's very much the same way. Find some sort of a networking or cyber expert that can help you check that box. That way you don't have to try to learn or know it all and miss something crucial. You can help by getting the right person or the persons involved to help your business. Now, the first thing they're going to do is this kind of a three-phase thing with your business to try to employ this castle mentality. So you're going to try to prepare so that you can turn away the attacker. So the first thing is preparing your business. So firewalls, software, patches and updates we mentioned, cyber protection. And one of the largest ones, and Scott referred to it, but I'm going to give it a little buzzword, the human firewall. And that's where we talk about preparing everyone who works there for that innocent looking email that has a JPEG attached. It looks like the boss sent you a picture of a fish he just caught. Well, it's not from the boss and it's not a fish. It's probably a nasty payload. And you're going to shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, I guess I didn't get the picture. I didn't get the fish. Meanwhile, the payload is in your computer and the bad guys are hard at work of exploiting the network. So I once had a client ask me, assuming that he was going to stump me, and he said, can you guarantee me absolute security if we hire your company? I said, yes, I can. And no company had said that to him. And I had a smile on my face. And he said, how are you going to do that? I said, I only have two demands. One is we take a pair of scissors and we cut every single blue line we can find in the business. And two, you lock everybody who works here outside the front door. And he looked at me like, well, that's not an answer. I said, exactly. Because safe by definition is the absence of risk. And as long as we have employees and people inside of our network clicking and doing their business, then they're providing an avenue for the bad guy to exploit holes that they might find. So if you have somebody, whether it's internal IT, external IT, a company like ours, it's important to lean on their knowledge, lean on their expertise, get references, because IT is a very deep hole. You can have someone who swears that they're an expert, and they might be an expert, but it might be in a very narrow avenue that has nothing to do with cybersecurity. So check their references and that kind of thing. That's important. The second thing is try to find cyber insurance for the when and not the if. So the cyber insurance is important. One of the scary things about a cyber breach is the fact that 10% of businesses, small businesses, this is not the Targets, the Yahoos, those kinds of things. This is small businesses, the ones that are all around us in the state of Maine. The number of breaches that occur to small businesses as opposed to the whole subset of breaches is 28%. So it's not if, it's when. And the number of small businesses that do get breached, 10% of them go out of business within 6 months. 37% of those businesses claim bankruptcy, and another 28% suffer significant financial damage that take up to 5 years to recover from. So those are business killers. If you're within your first 2 years, you have enough struggles as a small business without having to pay out or lose a significant amount of revenue. So that preparation piece is super important. The cyber insurance might be the thing that keeps your business online after you get breached, if somehow you fail to prepare or somebody clicked on something that they didn't intend to click on. And the third thing is to have a mitigation plan. And again, I know this is scary thinking. This is like sitting down and writing a will. It shines a light on our mortality, but it is absolutely crucial. So you have to have a plan, because then you won't be making it up while under fire. So if your business does get breached, have a plan on how to figure out how to restore your business, get your folks back working, how to report it, who to report it to. And I believe Matthew is going to shine some light on those types of things of reporting mandates and that kind of thing. And then also monitor, because Unfortunately, the nefarious part of being breached is oftentimes because you're restoring it under duress and you're trying to get back up and running, and everything else is more important than being absolutely certain. There's a small piece of code left in a server or left in a desktop, and it's dormant, and all it needs is a little bit of time and a little bit of outreach to the bad guy, and all of a sudden your virus is back in 8 months because the bad guy is just waiting for the right opportunity when the light is off their behavior. So these are all things that are out there. These are available. This is not like launching the space shuttle here. This stuff is all available. It just takes the time to sit down and plan for this. And each step of this, you're definitely going to learn a lot. There are folks who run small businesses that will tell you they learned way more than they ever intended to or ever wanted to with regard to cyber and with regard to the pain that comes with it. But this stuff will make you look like either a hero or a zero if you take the time to go through it. Because unfortunately, if you don't take the time to go through it, it can be a killer. If you do get breached, or when you do get breached, if you're not prepared for the financial cost, it might cost you so much that you go out of business. If you are prepared for that and you get insurance, but you don't have a plan to mitigate it. And the scary part is when you do suffer a breach, the average time to discover a breach, for instance, in healthcare, is 228 days to discover that they've even been breached. So think about that. Healthcare has this other whole problem with HIPAA and keeping information secure and encrypted, both in transit and at rest. And the problem is, if 228 days just to know that you have that breach inside your network, they're getting anything and everything that they want. And then the mandated reporting includes the FBI, and it includes your clients. And again, it can really destroy even a large company if the damage is deep enough and long enough and has enough files that make it out onto the dark web or out into the wild, as it were. The planning portion of this, like I use the term castle mentality. And if you think about that, hopefully it simplifies it for all the folks on here that have those roles. It's not that you have to come up with all of those. But again, if you take the time and you find and vet a trusted partner or somebody that can come in and help you with those, you can literally do each one of these things that I've mentioned, the setup and the preparation, the insurance and the mitigation plan. You can do them simultaneously if you find the right folks. It could be all in one company. More than likely it's not. They don't recommend that the same company that does your managed services also does your cyber insurance, because it can get sticky, because there are two streams there that should probably stay separate. But if you have a trusted insurer, more than likely they carry cyber insurance now, just because of the pace of these breaches and attacks. So it's something that we deal with every day. And the good news is although we all find insurance troublesome, expensive, and pesky, it will make you go through the exercise of slowing down and inspecting your network and getting the answers that they need. And in so doing, you'll learn of some holes that you have inside of your network that you may not have even discovered. So by going through those three processes, again, they're totally achievable if you find the right folks to help you out with them. And by the end of the week, you could literally have a significant start on solving those three very basic problems. And then you can move on and produce widgets and worry about the legal issues or whatever else. But it takes time and it takes attention and it takes a budget as well. So we still have organizations today that call us in, and we're shocked when we get there, because we still have companies that are operating with a break fix mentality, where they have a man in the van, so to speak, who leaves a card and says, call me if it doesn't light up. And in today's world, that just doesn't cut it. If you're in business and you're serious about it, that just doesn't cut it, because you can't plan for outages. And more than likely, they're not using the tools that are necessary to keep the cyber attackers at bay and to help mitigate the issues inside your network. So that kind of brings to a close what I had prepared, and I'll leave some time for Matthew and for follow-up questions.
Thank you very much, John. Those, again, were very insightful comments, and there's a lot for businesses to think about. So thank you very much. Our next speaker is Matthew Eggers from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Matthew.
Linda, thank you very much. Thanks for having the Chamber and me with you, the U.S. Chamber. Let me pick up one thing that John just mentioned is maybe a little thread through his presentation to mine is, one of the things you hear a lot about is cyber hygiene, kind of keeping your devices, your information, if you will, clean. And I think one of the ways I like to think about it, and it may be useful to others, is cyber fitness, meaning, hey, I don't care where you are as a business with respect to having a cyber plan. There's no better place to start than maybe tomorrow. We're looking at a new year. This year's gone very quickly. But the analogy of getting those old shoes out of the closet, walking, there are things that you can do on your own, and more, I think, in partnership with folks on this panel. Don't go it alone, but I think if anything, taking some basic steps to protect your devices, your data, so you as a business, small, mid-size, or large, can keep doing what you're doing. The other thing I like to think about it, and others may view it the same way, is, I know how to change oil in my car, but I don't do it for a whole host of reasons. Likewise, I'm going to be working with professionals who know how to manage cybersecurity to help me do that, so I don't suffer what's known as a business email compromise or become victim of a ransomware attack. And unfortunately, those two kinds of incidents are very rampant. Businesses are very understandably reluctant to talk about them, and we haven't figured out a way to deal with them that well yet. Now, with that said, clearly Washington, members in the House and the Senate, as well as the administration, look at the landscape out there, the business, security, political landscape, and they react, right? They respond to incidents ranging from the SolarWinds supply chain campaign to the Colonial Pipeline ransomware event, and they take action. Let me kind of hit on a few things that the U.S. Chamber works on, and I lead our cyber working group. We've got about 300 some organizations. We get together pretty regularly to talk about a bill, a piece of a regulation, or some aspect of policy that I tend to think of is not, let's say, legislation or a reg. Let me just maybe hit on a few, and then I'm going to circle back to cyber incident reporting legislation, which I think right now is pretty much the beating heart of what Congress is debating. So first, we've got the legislation, which I'm going to come back to, but Congress is right now likely to clear this year, I think, leaving aside current debates that are literally happening today in the U.S. Senate. Congress is going to move a cyber incident reporting bill, and I'll talk about that in detail. Many entities in the business community, including the U.S. Chamber, we've been very involved in working with a range of lawmakers in the House, Reps Clark, Katko, in the Senate, Peters, Portman, Warner, one of your state senators, Mr. King. I think he was on recently. He was a co-chair of the Cyberspace Solarium Commission. He's got legislation that is in the format of an amendment that could take a ride on the defense bill. So, and he's been a very instrumental player in the area of cyber legislation and a good partner of the U.S. Chamber. On the regulatory side of things, and I'm not being comprehensive here, but there's something known as the ICTS supply chain rule, which is kind of short for the Information and Communications Technology Services, or ICTS supply chain rulemaking. The current administration inherited a rule from the last one, and I think, if anything, one of the things we're watching is, as it is more fully implemented, one of the things that our members take note of is it gives the Department of Commerce secretary substantial authority to block or unwind, if you will, almost any ICTS transaction with kind of in an arrangement where our members feel that activity is somewhat of a black box, and or there may not be sufficient coordination with other federal programs. The administration did come out with some new thinking this past week that might try to scope things a little bit more narrowly. Anyway, our members are trying to make this rule more workable. Third kind of category or basket policy, if you will, oftentimes pretty much just a catch-all of everything DC. The White House came out with probably the most sweeping cybersecurity executive order that I'm aware of. I've been with the chamber for about 14 years. I don't recall an EO as sweeping. A couple things, not everything, but first, I think it really pushes agencies to get their own cyber houses in order, and that's a positive thing. Agencies, the leadership here in DC know that they kind of need to start kind of at home and get their own houses in order. Other things that the EO does calls for the certification and or labeling, or at least efforts in this space of, let's say, consumer software and IoT devices. I think in the main, we definitely share the goal of having stronger software, stronger devices. I think one of the things that we have tried to do at the US Chamber is pair what we would call a program of sorts like this with protections, liability protections. We also want to have programs that are preemptive in nature. So anyway, so we've got the policy, an EO, a massive EVO that came out in May of this year. And then let me circle back and quickly walk through a few things on the legislation. I don't want to get too into the weeds, but I might, forgive me. But either way, we got a House bill and a Senate bill. The House bill being led by Reps Clark and Katko, both from New York, and then in the Senate, Peters and Portman, Mr. Peters from Michigan, Mr. Portman from Ohio. Excuse me. Couple key things. In the main, I'm not going to make too fine of distinctions between those two bills, but if you want to think about it this way, this legislation would compel critical infrastructures and critical infrastructure entities, as well as private entities, and the details are still being kind of ironed out, to report covered critical incidents to DHS's, the Department of Homeland Security's cyber kind of wing, known as CISA, within about 72 hours. So you've got a very tight window to report a cyber incident, something that is major, right? Something like probably like a ransomware attack. Likewise, a ransomware payment would have to be submitted to CISA within 24 hours. So you've got very, very, very tight windows to do reporting. Many organizations already do a lot of reporting to the federal government. I think there will be a number of small, mid-sized organizations that will find it very challenging from a resource standpoint. And frankly, they won't know, at least out of the gates, to what agency or to whom they have to report. So 72 hours, 24 hours, a couple things to think about. Some other aspects here, liability protections. We've pushed for protections for the submission of a report, right? We want businesses to be sharing those major incidents so government can connect the dots, pull that information together, kick that information back out to private and public actors so they can prevent or defend against a potential attack. And then frankly, let's face it, whether law enforcement or maybe DoD Cyber Command takes step to knock bad actors off balance. Reporting harmonization, I think in essence, we want, if there is reporting organizations, to be reporting only once into government, not multiple times. Enforcement, the key legislation envisions some kind of potential subpoena process if an organization is not thought to have reported what would be considered a reportable incident. DHS CISA would reach out to the company, try to have a conversation, get the right kind of data, if you will. If that doesn't happen, there could be a subpoena process unfolding with potential actions by the Attorney General or regulators. Information protection is very key. Information that's shared or provided or submitted to the government should be protected, among other things, from FOIA, public disclosure. Companies in the main don't like being embarrassed. Agencies don't like being embarrassed. The information that's submitted should be protected from regulatory use or agencies not being in the main enabled to use information that's submitted for regulatory purposes. In at least under the legislation, the entity that's affected would have to report, but it also may be able to work with third parties to help do that. And I think that would be key. Some organizations are going to need help in understanding all the kinds of things that they're going to have to do to report. And keep in mind that all the details are far from clear yet. We've still got to get a final bill across the finish line, signed into law. We would still have to have DHS CISA undertake a rulemaking process. To that effect, now I'm going to finish here in just in a minute. The rulemaking, we've been pleased to see that the rulemaking is kind of extended through a potential notice of proposed rulemaking. At least the Senate legislation suggests that. Essentially what that means is you've got more opportunity, a lengthier process to have input. I do think that it's always been important to engage legislation early on, because once it kind of moves into the regulatory space, you've got less and less, I think, influence, the ability to kind of shape what a rule would feature. And what do I mean by that? One example could include the kinds of information that CISA will want about a cyber incident, or what it may want with respect to the ransomware payment. And then information sharing. I think really the end game in many respects is not about just getting more reports into government. I think government could be overwhelmed. I think with the reporting that could flow under this legislation, particularly in the area of ransomware payments, essentially what we need to see more of is government getting that data, collecting it, analyzing it, distributing it to many of your Maine State Chamber of Commerce members, U.S. Chamber of Commerce members, other industry organizations, information sharing bodies, other agencies, so they can protect and defend. And I think if, at the end of the day, if our members see that the information that's reported under a potential legislation is used well to push back on nation state hackers, including China, Iran, North Korea, Russia, or their proxies, I think then legislation would be viewed very positively. And I think that's probably a good place to finish. So, Linda, thank you.
Thank you very much to all of our speakers. Does anybody have any questions? If you do, please put them in the chat. I'll give it a minute. I think we have one question. Oh, that's just from Angie. Okay.
Okay, I was going to say before the questions come around, I was thinking about one just in the conversation that that John was having in his presentation, and where Matthew picked up on it, and oddly enough, although not oddly enough, we're kind of all connected and talking about this in the same subject. But I was thinking about when the breach we all know is going to happen, but the more we practice to be ready for it,
Yeah.
it's kind of important to be ready. It's the same way when I was a teenager, I worked at scout camp, and we always had lost swimmer searches. And the critical thing was, if there was a buddy tag left on the board, there were a set of procedures we followed to see if we could find the person to save the person in the water. And we did it the same way every single time, and we practiced that. The idea of a tabletop exercise and practicing what are all the steps that should happen if something were to come up, and go through just sitting around the table, around the room, and asking those questions, and what are the steps to follow, would be a great option to figure out how, what do we know, what do we not know, and how do we make sure we're ready. John, is that something you've done before with organizations to help them, and where would they start if you've done that before?
Yeah, so a lot of the businesses over 25 employees often have a security or an IT committee, which is brilliant, because much like the castle mentality that you use for layers of security, if you get more heads in the room when it comes to their organization, they're going to know their organization the best. Like, for instance, you might have one manager that specifically is in charge of folks that go out in the field. So they're worried about laptops and the behavior of connecting at Panera Bread or whatever else. So if you get a group of folks in the room, and we've gone through that, and we will go through this, we go through it on kind of a planning session with regard to the budget. So to draw another analogy, right? Everybody always budgets and plans because you don't want those financial drop-offs, and neither do you want an IT security drop-off as well. So a lot of them have started to adopt the same type of session. In fact, around the same type of year, usually in the fall, they'll kind of have their meetings to say, okay, how did this year go? Did we achieve everything we set out to achieve with regard to IT? And then where are our holes? And then we're invited to those meetings because we can do audits and run certain programs that look for holes in their security, so that we end up providing not just the knowledge that they have a hole, but a couple of different solutions. So it all helps to say, okay, and because everybody knows that the finances are not limitless, right? It's like insurance. You can insure yourself right into poverty. But it's the same thing with IT budgeting. So then you can kind of triage where your biggest holes are, and you go for the lowest hanging fruit. And HIPAA behaves much the same way. When the folks, they know that they have a mountain of regulations, but as long as you've audited it and you're researching it and you're spending time and effort trying to mitigate, worst to best, or whatever you try to do, at least you're taking action.
Matt, I had a question for you. Thank you for your comments as well, because I know you guys do a tremendous amount for businesses at the federal level. So thank you for that. But my question to you is, what is the timing on, what do you think the timing is on a bill that we're gonna get?
Without getting too much into the kind of.
I mean, if you had to guess.
I've been telling people that I think we get a bill this year. I think that week right before Christmas and the related holidays, lawmakers tend to soften up, right? And they kind of want to just go home. So while there's uncertainty about, let's say, what happens with the Senator Peters Portman bill, the cyber incident reporting bill, the main one in the Senate, I think I'd probably put a little bit of my own money on the fact that I think it gets cleared up probably in the next week or two. And then what's known as conference, basically the House lawmakers and Senate lawmakers are going to have to put their bills together and come up with a final little schoolhouse rock. But yeah, I do think we get one. I think that there's strong enough bipartisan consensus that we need more reporting from the private sector, leaving aside all the kind of good things and challenges that come with that.
Okay. All right.
And Linda, if I could, one thing I wanted to just pick up on with maybe Scott or John, one of the things that usually stands out to us is trying to encourage members, businesses of all sizes, to understand who, let's say at the FBI, the Secret Service, are their potential go-to people, so they're not thinking about who they need to call. Standard thinking for maybe the 3-4 of us maybe John, what's your experience in getting businesses over that hump, right? How do you encourage folks to do that, or is that part of what you do?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very small section of it where the question might come up. And in fact, we've seen it exercised a couple of times with clients or would-be clients that have been in that predicament. And generally in Maine, because of our rural nature, this would be a lot different if it was in DC, but in Maine, I think we have 3 FBI agents assigned to the entire state, or so it would seem, so you kind of call the local field office and they'll guide you as to, we'll have an agent get back in touch. And then the agent, in my experience, the agent has said, have you also called Homeland Security? Have you also called? So they kind of turn out to be a resource and also a resource to point them to other mandatory reporting and that kind of thing.
And maybe if I may, Linda, workforce. If there's one topic that comes up all the time from officials, whether lawmakers on Capitol Hill or the administration and elsewhere, we need more cyber talent in the pipeline. Scott, I say more about what you guys are doing and how people can get plugged in and then out into get employed, let's say maybe by government agencies or the private sector. What's your thought on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we at the Rue Institute, we're focused on graduate level education. And so we've got a number of folks who are either adding to their careers or expanding their careers by looking at graduate degrees and certificates in cybersecurity and computer science, data science, and utilizing that knowledge to help advance. I also serve on the board of the Department of Technology at the University of Southern Maine, and they have a bachelor's of science program in cybersecurity. And the board members I sit with, I mean, are come from law enforcement and cybersecurity in the professional space, as well as in the academic and in the commercial world. And so a lot of what we're looking at is basically our conversation we've had today, but in a bigger scale of how do we teach more people about how to be good cyber aware citizens? How do we develop the workforce so that it's out there? I was recently reading an article that was musing about how IT, rather than being this separate siloed department in an organization, actually ought to be integrated and now part of what is the entire business, whatever the business might be. And it's almost the same conversation we're having around cybersecurity. The whole business needs to be aware of cybersecurity and what to do to be effective. And thus IT ought to be everywhere and part of the business, as opposed to a separate thing. We're going to rely on them to take care of our needs. And so I think that's part of how the workforce develops, right? John talked about you can't do everything. And absolutely, specialization is, what caused us to all move into communities, if you look back in anthropologic history. But the whole idea of where should cybersecurity begin and how do we focus on that is with everybody in the workforce. And just like, I'm a big fan and a proponent of computer science for all, everybody needs to know something about computers, because there isn't a thing that we do in our world that doesn't involve computers in some fashion. That's a wonderful different topic for a different day. But the whole idea is how do we make sure that we teach everybody about cybersecurity just as much.
Right. Okay, well, I think that wraps us up, and I'd like to thank our speakers, Scott Valcour from the Rue Institute, John Perkins from the Maine Technology Group, and Matthew Eggers from the U.S. Chamber. I'd also like to thank our sponsors again, our premier sponsors, Give It, Get It, Thomas College, our community sponsors, Cross Insurance, Markham, IEEE, the University of Maine, and the University of Maine Law School, and our supporting sponsors, AmeriHealth and Caritas, Eaton Peabody, Bangor Savings Bank, Central Maine Power, Rudman and Winchell, and MEMIC. Thank you all for participating, and this concludes our series on our webinar series on cybersecurity. And I hope you had a lot to take away from this, and it really it is important. So I wish you all luck, and thank you again for joining us. Then thank you to our speakers.
Welcome.
Take care.
Thanks for having us.